This is the 2019 BMW Z4, and this is the latest version of BMW's little two-seat rear-wheel drive roadster. This car traces its lineage back to the BMW Z3, which came out for the 1996 model year almost 25 years ago. This is the fourth generation of BMW's little Z3 and Z4 line, and it's been fully redesigned for the 2019 model year. And today, I'm going to review it. I've borrowed this Z4 from Crevier BMW here in Orange County, California. Crevier is the largest BMW dealership in North America, and they always get everything the best, the first, the most, the newest, and that includes the new Z4, which has just gone on sale here in North America. I'll start with a brief overview. Now, the 2019 Z4 is going to be offered in two versions. This version is the base model, and it comes with a 2-liter turbocharged four-cylinder that makes 255 horsepower. It does 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, and it starts around $51,000. BMW inexplicably calls this version the Z4 S-Drive 30i. There will also be a more powerful version called the M40i, which will have a turbocharged 6-cylinder that will make 382 horsepower and do 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. That one is going to start from around $65,000. Now, like past Z4 models, this one is a 2-seat rear-wheel drive roadster convertible. It's unlikely that a coupe model will be returning to the Z4 lineup. If you're interested in a manual transmission, you are out of luck. This Z4 is only going to be offered with an 8-speed automatic. As you probably know, this Z4 shares its platform and its larger 6-cylinder engine with the upcoming Toyota Supra, which I will review when it comes out later this spring. But the Z4 is out first, and so today I'm going to review it. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the Z4, and I'm going to show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the Z4, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also rounded up a list of the best used 2-seat roadsters currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Z4 with something called Comfort Access that makes it incredibly easy to lock and unlock your car. All right, check this out. You know how a lot of cars, you can walk up to them, tap the door, they unlock, and you just open the door and then you never have to take the key out of your pocket? Well, this car takes it a step further. Check this out. You go into the infotainment system, into Comfort Access, and you can activate these two checkboxes, one for unlock on approach and the other for lock when walking away. And then watch this. All right, I've closed the door and I'm now walking away. The door is unlocked, the key is in my pocket, and if I get far enough away, the car locks automatically. I didn't touch the door, I didn't touch the key, the car has just locked. By the same token, if I walk up to the car, walk up to the driver's door, get close enough, it will sense that I'm there, and it will automatically unlock. Again, I don't have to touch the door or the key. This takes unlocking and locking the car to an incredibly new level of ease. You don't have to do anything except be there with the key in your pocket, and the car will unlock and lock automatically. Now, next up, an interesting quirk you might notice when you climb inside this car is that the center console is not symmetrical. You go down and look at the bottom of the center console, and you can see that the right side, the passenger side, is larger than the left side, and only the right side has this little blue strip of ambient lighting. So why would they do that? Just to annoy people who want everything to be perfect and equal? No, there's actually a purpose to it. Now go back further and you can see the center console lid is also not symmetrical. The right side is larger than the left side. Well, if you open up the center console lid, you can see that the right side contains cup holders. And the reason the right side is larger is so that you can put a drink in the center console cup holders and then close the smaller panel on the left side. Your drink stays put, but now you have a driver armrest. It's actually a really good piece of design. It might throw you off at first to see these things asymmetrical, but there's a good reason behind it. Also in the center console, you can see that there's this little rubber mat in between the cup holders that says Z4 on it, which is an interesting place to put the model name for the car and the little rubber center console mat. There are actually several subtle hidden Z4 logos throughout this interior. Another one is in front of the gear lever in the center console, this little silver thing that you push in order to open the wireless charger door. That has the Z4 logo on it, even though you'll probably never care that it's there. There's also little Z4 logos on the roll bars behind the front seats, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. Very small, very unnoticeable, but they're there. Now, speaking of the roll bar behind the seats, let's talk about the seats. The seats look nice, they look sporty and comfortable, and also they have a hole in them. If you look at the bottom of the headrest area, you can see there's a little hole you stick your fingers through. Why does it have the hole? Well, sports seats in like race cars have holes in them so you can stick a racing harness through it, but I think this one is just there for style. So you can brag to people, yeah, my seat's got a hole in it. Yeah, I can stick my fingers through it. Can you do that? Other interesting items in the seat area, behind the seats, you have a little extra storage. Since this is a relatively small cabin, there's a little net area where you can store stuff if you want to. And you can see behind that, there's a little compartment that unlatches. If you unlatch that from the interior and then you go into the trunk and unlatch the corresponding piece in the trunk, you actually have a pass-through from the trunk to the cabin, so you can stick long, slender items through. Like, for example, if you wanted to take your Z4 skiing, you have a little ski pass-through, although I'm not sure if skis would fit in this car. But even if you're going to IKEA, you want to transport a lamp, whatever, that's a little pass-through that gives you a little bit more practicality than a normal two-seat Roadster. Now, next we move on to the headlight controls in this car. They're over to the left of the steering wheel, and they're pretty standard. Auto, you can turn the headlights on, you have little parking lights, and you also have two little buttons for P to the left and P to the right. So what do those buttons do? Well, if you press, say, the left one, it turns on a portion of your taillights on the left side of the car and a portion of your headlights. And the theory here is if you park your Z4 on a tight street, you can turn on that little left or right parking light to let drivers know that your car is there so they'll see it and they won't hit it. I guess this is especially intended for really narrow streets in Europe when it's dark, so drivers don't accidentally hit your car since the very corners of it are illuminated when it's parked in the street. Not a bad idea. Now, another good idea in this car is the climate controls. And I say that because in a lot of cars with an infotainment system with a lot of technology, the climate controls are integrated into the infotainment system. And then you have to go into the infotainment screen to do basically anything. Change the climate controls, navigation, radio, and it's all just too much. So BMW has taken the climate controls out of the infotainment system and they've placed them right here in the middle of the center control stack. And you can see they're very, very simple. Just these 5 silver buttons and this little screen control almost all of the climate controls in this car. And it means that you can change all your climate controls, temperature, fan speed, whatever, without having to go through various menus in the infotainment system. Now, next up, I want to talk about the camera system in this car. Now, I covered the parking cameras in my review of the new BMW 3 Series, which I'll link in the description below. And this car doesn't have as sophisticated of a camera system as that one, but it still has a very good camera. You can see here very high resolution, and as you start to approach something, these little boxes pop up, green, yellow, red, to let you know exactly where you're about to hit something and exactly how close you are to actually hitting it. This really is some of the best camera technology in the car industry. Something else I've shown in previous BMW videos, but something I absolutely love, is the presets in this car. So like in most cars on the radio, you have 8 different presets, but unlike in most cars, you don't just have to program these for radio functions. You can program a preset to pull up the navigation menu if you want to, so it can be kind of hard to remember how you've set your presets. But BMW makes it easy because you don't have to press something to figure out what you have it set for. Instead, just slide your fingers over the presets, and then on the infotainment screen, it shows what each thing is preset for. So that way you don't have to press each preset, you pull up something you didn't mean to and you get mad. Instead, just slide over and that will tell you which preset does which thing, and then you can press it. It's a really smart idea. Next up, another interesting infotainment item in this car. When you turn it off, it asks if you want to put it in valet mode. That's not all that unusual. I would probably limit the speed or lock out the trunk. But the thing I like is the little picture they use for valet mode. It's this guy with this little valet hat. think that's a funny, quaint little picture to describe valet mode. Now, next up, another interesting item in the infotainment system. In the navigation settings, if you go into route settings, you can choose how you want to drive on toll roads. You can tell the system if you have a toll pass or if you just have cash, or if you want to skip toll roads altogether. The theory here is if you tell the system that you only have cash, it will not send you down toll roads that are toll pass only. Or if you tell it you have a toll pass, it will send you in the toll pass lanes, and it will calculate your time to destination accordingly, since you'll probably get there a little faster if you're using the toll pass lanes. It's an interesting configurable item in some infotainment systems. Now, next up, another item I like in the infotainment system is the turn signal settings. Now, in a lot of cars, if you tap the turn signal lever, it will flash 3 times as like a lane changer convenience feature, so you don't have to hold it down. And in some cars, you can configure how many times it will flash, usually 3, 5, or 7. But in this car, when you configure it, you can choose between 1 flash or 3 in true BMW style. They won't let it flash more, but they will let it flash only once, because they know the turn signal habits of the people who buy BMWs. I found that to be rather fitting. And finally, our last interesting infotainment system item. If you go into something called climate control rules, it will allow you to program at what temperature the heated seats automatically turn on. But check this out. It's in Celsius. Now, I recently showed this in the new BMW 3 Series review that I did, and it was in Fahrenheit, but for some reason in this car it's in Celsius, even though everything else in this car is in Fahrenheit. The climate controls, the outside temperature. It seems to be a small oversight, perhaps a mistake at the factory or with the software. Maybe they didn't think anybody would ever actually go into that menu, but I did. Now, next we move on to the wind deflector. A lot of convertibles have wind deflectors. Some have very nice power-operated wind deflectors. Not this car. Instead, it's this kind of flimsy little plastic thing you put between the roll bars behind the seats, but you can install it there. It's helpfully labeled back and front to let you know how to install it. And when you stick it in place, it does do a good job of making sure wind just kind of sails over the top and then over the wind deflector so it doesn't mess up your hair when you're driving top down on a sunny, windy day. And since I'm talking about driving around with the top down, yes, it is time. You always request it. I'm going to show you the convertible top operation in this car. Now, to activate the convertible top, there is a button in the center console. To put the top up, you pull up on the button, and then it begins. The top process in this car is actually pretty simple, pretty quick. It's not all that big. And putting it down is also simple. You push the button down and then... and there you go, that's it. That's how the top goes up and down in a 2019 BMW Z4. And next up, moving on to the outside of the Z4, actually I want to start under the hood where you can see this car's 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder engine. Like I said, 255 horsepower. If you look at this engine, you can also see there is a lot of room left in front of the engine. They could put something much bigger in here, and of course they will. They're going to put in the turbo 6, but almost looks like you could fit a V8 in here. Actually, the reason that there's a lot of room under the hood is not because they're gonna put a 12-cylinder in here or something. It's because the engine is intentionally set back very far in the car. This has been a hallmark of the Z3 and the Z4 ever since it debuted, and it's for weight distribution. By putting the engine further back, it makes sure to keep the car more balanced, the engine more in the middle, rather than having it hang out over the front wheels, where it would make the front end feel really heavy in corners. Now, next I want to talk about the general exterior styling of the Z4. Personally, I happen to think this is the best looking Z4 yet. I have a feeling a lot of people won't agree with me about that, but that's what tends to happen. A new design comes out, people are like, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Then the car's on sale for a few years, it grows on them, and then it's time for that car to be redesigned. People are like, no, I like the old one better. In this case, though, I really do think this is a nice-looking Z4. The original Z4, the one that came out in 04, I always thought was a little bit too fussy. The previous generation model to this, I always thought was, frankly, a little bit too generic. I think this is a well-proportioned car, looks good, and I think it does a good job of furthering the Z4 line and fitting in with BMW's current design ethos. I also happen to think the Z4 looks a little better than the Supra, although I haven't seen the Supra in person yet, so I'm going to reserve judgment fully until I do. Now, next up, we move around to the back of the Z4, and I want to talk about the trunk. Open it up and you will discover that it is, in fact, just a trunk. There's really nothing especially interesting in here. It's a little larger than you might expect for a car in this segment, but it's not unusual, except for the fact that it has that pass-through, like I mentioned. You can see, again, the corresponding side that you have to unlatch here in order to pass items through to the front seats from the trunk. Unusual in a car like this. A couple of other interesting items in the back of this car. One is the brake light turn signal situation. Check this out. These are the brake lights, and you can see they're on and they're pretty normal. Then you put on the turn signal, and whichever side turn signal you put on completely takes that entire lighting assembly and uses it for the turn signal, so that side's brake light is no longer on. I can't believe that regulations still allow this. You put on the turn signal and 1/3 of the car's brake lights completely disappears. It's crazy to me. I can't believe the government hasn't forced automakers to make separate brake lights and turn signals by now, but they haven't, so this car has the brake light turn signal as one piece. Another interesting item back here is the model designation S-Drive 30i. Which is just ridiculous BMW speak. It's like when you see in a real estate listing that the house is walkable to restaurants because it's next to a 7-Eleven. This is that kind of thing. Why is it called this? I guess S-Drive is for rear-wheel drive cars and 30i is supposed to approximate the power output, but it just really makes no sense. BMW truly has some of the most bizarre trim level naming in the entire car industry. And so those are the quirks and features of the new BMW Z4. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Z4. Short throttle response is actually really surprising because this car on paper doesn't seem like it has all that much power. I'm really surprised by this because I just drove the 330 BMW. That felt okay. But this actually feels quick. Sitting here in the interior, it looks nice. Everything looks good. It looks like most of your typical other BMWs, which is a good thing. BMW interiors of late have been just fantastic. Great materials, no blanks, everything looks good. Yeah, the acceleration is really good. I've driven Z3s from 20 years ago. Even the nicest one, the 2.8, the 3.0, they feel so slow in comparison to now the base model of the Z4. But 250 horsepower doesn't really tell the whole story anymore. These days with sport modes and excellent transmissions and that sort of thing, automakers are really good at being able to make cars feel a lot faster than they would seem on paper. I will say at higher speeds, it doesn't quite feel as fast as at lower speeds. At lower speeds, it feels like you're able to just kind of dart around whatever, but as you get up there, you start to get into a situation where it starts to taper off a little bit. Yeah, really good steering, doesn't feel as light as the sedans do, the larger cars. Obviously, this car is tuned more to be a performance car, and you really do feel like you can throw it around and get away with it. It kind of goads you into having fun with it. It feels like a Miata, just luxurious and that sort of thing, which has always been the case for the Z4. It's always been a fun little rear-wheel drive car. I miss the manual transmission, but it's still a fun little rear-wheel drive car. The market for these cars has slowed down. Not as many people anymore want little two-seat rear-wheel drive sports cars. When this car launched 25 years ago as the Z3, it was the hottest thing in the world. The SLK, the Audi TT, the Boxster, and the market isn't quite what it once was. But there are still people who are interested in this, and so I'm glad BMW is keeping the tradition alive. Mercedes just announced that they're canceling their competitor to this car, the SLC. All right, the top is going up because it has started to rain. The top is nice and quick, as I showed you before. You can do it at a stoplight. Obviously, this car isn't quite as quiet as your typical BMW luxury sedans that has a cloth roof, so it can't quite be insulated in the same way. But it still feels very nice and very luxurious in here, and the tech is good, and that's a benefit because you're paying for a sports car, you get the sporty driving characteristics, but you also don't really have to make many compromises in terms of the tech and the appearance of the interior. I would think that this engine is going to be fine for the vast majority of people. When the Z3 came out, even the early Z4s, the base engines were kind of slow. You really had to work them to get power out of it. I really don't feel like that is true now. And so that's the 2019 BMW Z4. Back in the 1990s, this sporty luxury roadster segment was really hot. You had the Mercedes SLK, you had the Z4, the Audi TT, the Porsche Boxster. They were all coming out right at that time. They all went head-to-head in direct competition. These days, the segment has cooled down a lot, and sales are nowhere near what they used to be. But if you're still looking for a two-seat rear-wheel drive sporty luxury BMW Roadster, they still make one, and it's pretty good. And now it's time to give this car a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Z4 looks good and it gets a 7 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds and it gets a 5 out of 10. Handling is reasonably sharp and it gets a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is pretty high, it's quick enough, and the convertible body style is great, but more power and 3 pedals would improve this. For now it gets a 6 out of 10. Cool factor is only okay and it gets a 5 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 29 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features, and the Z4 is loaded with a lot of great new tech and it gets a 7 out of 10. Comfort is normal for the segment and it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is good, the materials are very nice, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is normal for the segment and it gets a 2 out of 10. Finally, value, and I think it's a decent one. This car is pretty quick, it's a fun two-seat rear-wheel drive roadster, it gets good fuel economy, and has good tech, but a $51,000 starting price before options is a bit steep, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 27 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 56 out of 100. I haven't reviewed any of the Z4's closest rivals, but here it is against the Honda S2000 and some other cool BMWs. The Z4 is a nice car, though there's less and less interest in this segment, but if you do want a luxury two-seat fun roadster, this one is a great choice. That's actually a trunk pass-through. If you unlatch that from the interior and then unlatch the similar thing in the trunk, you can put